Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth again with you for another sneak peek video preview of this week's full audiobook release here on Say with Jay. We're going back to Mistletoe, Arkansas again for Dreaming of Her Best Friend's Kiss. It is the fifth book in Jessie Gussman's Cowboy Mountain Christmas Sweet Romance series. And before I get into the book, I wanted to wish a slightly belated happy birthday to Alain Robert. This is Alain. He just turned 60 years old in Paris on the 7th. And you might not know Alain, but you might have heard of his nickname. Alain is also known as the French Spider-Man. Now, he's not a superhero. He doesn't shoot webs from his fingers. He doesn't chase down supervillains, that kind of thing. But he does share one thing with his namesake, in that he likes to climb buildings. Really, really tall buildings. He has climbed the Empire State Building. He's climbed the Willis Tower, formerly the Sears Tower in Chicago. He's climbed the Eiffel Tower many times. He's climbed the Sydney Opera House. If it's a tall building, like the Taipei 101, you can almost bet he's climbed it. The thing is, he likes to climb buildings without ropes and harnesses, equipment of any kind. He climbs these skyscrapers wearing only climbing shoes and carrying a small bag of chalk. I, on the other hand, just this year alone, have tweaked my back sleeping wrong. I've pinched a nerve in my neck sneezing. I've given myself a bone bruise because my cat startled me and I kicked my desk. I say that to say I'm not sure I trust myself on a tall ladder, much less climbing a tall building. But Alain decided to celebrate his 60th birthday by climbing the 48-story Total building in Paris. That's right. At 60 years old, he's climbing 48-story buildings. He did it to celebrate his 60th birthday, which is the traditional retirement age in France. And he made this statement: being 60 is nothing. You can still do sport, be active, do fabulous things. I'd also like to wish a belated 132nd birthday, or it would have been, on the 9th, for Harlan Sanders, who you probably do know as Colonel Sanders, the creator and the face of Kentucky Fried Chicken. What you may not know about Colonel Sanders, and by the way, he's an actual colonel. It's not a military title, but the Commonwealth of Kentucky grants the honorary title of Kentucky Colonel to certain people, and he had that bestowed on him because of Kentucky Fried Chicken, obviously. Anyway, what you may not know about him, though, is that he didn't franchise his first Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant until he was 62 years old. By the time he was 72, he had 600 restaurants. My point in mentioning both of those guys is to say that age is just a number, and to remind everybody that life is just a journey. It's not a destination. I mean, there's not a destination where you get to a point and stop. And for children of God, we know this journey doesn't end when our time on this earth ends. But while you're here on this earth, treat every day like the blessing that it is, and go and live your life. Do something, do fabulous things. And while you're at it, be a blessing to somebody else. Okay, now, back to Dreaming of Her Best Friend's Kiss. Dreaming of Her Best Friend's Kiss is the story of Blakely Barclay. Now, in some of the other books in this series, we've met other Barclay children who, you might recall, were raised by Race and Penny Steiner, their adoptive parents, after they lost their own parents in an automobile accident when they were all young. Now that they've become adults, Race and Penny have engaged in some casual matchmaking, you could say. And Blakely is very much wise to this. And in fact, she suspects that they're trying to set her up with someone she has no interest in being set up with. A pro football player who she believes has more brawn than brains. So she turns to her best friend, Martin Zedler, for help. And they come up with what they think is a pretty decent plan. They're going to pretend to be interested in each other until all this matchmaking nonsense goes away. It's a pretty good plan until some well-meaning soul enters them in the annual Mistletoe Kissing Contest. How's that going to turn out? Well, you've got to come back this Friday to see. But for now, here's a sample of Dreaming of Her Best Friend's Kiss, here on Say with Jay.
I said something about manufactured muscles, and Martin insisted I apologize to football players everywhere, and to you in particular. It makes me wonder if maybe he knew that you were there and didn't tell me. Martin shook his head and held his hands up.
I wouldn't do that to you, Whiplash.
He would, but she believed him when he said he didn't.
So, you guys are having a conversation about football players? That's interesting,
Dante said, with a touch of sarcasm in his words.
Actually, we weren't.
Martin gave Blakely a look that said he was coming to her rescue, and she owed him. Big time.
What we were actually talking about was that Blakely's parents had asked her to go to the horse show with you, and they had also asked me to go to the rodeo with Chrissy, which was unfortunate, since Blakely and I had been planning on going to those two things together, and now with her parents asking us to separate, we were kind of disappointed that we weren't going to be able to spend those days together. Oh, you guys are a couple.
Yes. No. They stared at each other as their words came out together. Blakely shook her head no, but Martin nodded. Why had Martin said yes? Regardless, he seemed to have this in hand better than she did, since she was already reeling from insulting the football player right in front of his face and mostly joking about it. But what she'd said hadn't been kind, and it served her right to get caught, she supposed. Her hand, which had been fingering her fork, was suddenly covered by Martin's. It wasn't that they'd never touched before. They'd worked together all the time, handing tools and bolts and wire back and forth between them. Halters, brushes, and whatever else they were doing on the farm. They'd touched plenty of times. But never just for the sake of touching, which was what this was. His hand over hers and hers sitting there, kind of like a scared rabbit, only maybe it felt more like a kitten, wanting to turn and stretch and brush against his. Absolutely ridiculous. She was embarrassed at herself, but thankfully at least she didn't say that out loud.
So, there's some confusion about that?
No. Yes. They really needed to get their act together. That time, she came out with the positive and he came out with the negative.
So, you look at me, think dumb jock, and are deliberately trying to confuse me?
Yes. No. She and Martin glared at each other.
Maybe you guys could answer one at a time. I've got a feeling the second person's answer would change after the first person stated their opinion.
He glanced between them, not seeming to take offense.
We do things a little differently in Michigan, where I come from.
Martin cleared his throat. I'm sorry. He held his hand out. I'm Martin Zedler, and I truly am happy to meet you. I'm sorry things are a little bit weird. Blakely and I have had a really unpredictable day, and obviously, we're a little upset about it. Blakely held her hand out, and Dante shook it without hesitation. I'm Blakely, and I really am sorry. Martin's right. We were being devious, and normally we're a little crazy, but devious isn't really in our vocabulary.
Blakely,
Dante said with a tilted head.
your dad is Pastor Race?
He asked, but it sounded like he already knew. Yes, why?
Well, your dad had made what seemed like an odd request to me.
Dante's biceps flexed as he ran a hand over his head. Oh? Blakely said, trying to pay attention when she really wanted him to leave. Martin was basically holding her hand and she kind of wanted to talk about that. Or maybe just enjoy it. Which she couldn't do with Dante there, judging her for not loving football.
Yeah.
His brows furrowed.
He said something about me being in the kissing contest with you.
Her fingers squeezed Martin's so tight his were probably in danger of falling off. I'm so sorry, I can't.
Oh, football players, huh?
I'm doing it with Martin. To Martin's credit, he barely blinked. Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.